Jenny and Mark had always dreamed of owning a home. When they stumbled upon a charming Victorian-era property at an unbelievably low price, they thought they had hit the jackpot. The house was picturesque, with ornate woodwork and stained glass windows. Their realtor, however, was quick to explain the catch. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had passed away in the house. Natural causes, the realtor assured them, glossing over the details. Eager to settle down, Jenny and Mark dismissed it as irrelevant. Their first night in the house was filled with excitement. They unpacked boxes late into the evening, marveling at their good fortune. But as they prepared for bed, Jenny noticed a chill in the air, despite the heater running. Doors creaked softly, and faint muffled voices seemed to carry through the walls. Mark dismissed it as the quirks of an old house settling, but Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Over the next few days, the unease grew. Jenny swore she heard her name whispered in the dead of night, a soft yet chilling call that woke her from sleep. Mark remained skeptical, but even he couldn't explain the occasional shadows that seemed to move just out of the corner of their eyes. One evening, while unpacking in the basement, Jenny stumbled upon a small wooden box tucked away in the corner behind some old furniture. Curious, she opened it to find dozens of black and white photographs. Each picture featured the elderly woman who had owned the house, smiling in different rooms. At first, Jenny thought it was a sentimental keepsake, but as she examined the photos more closely, a detail sent chills down her spine. In every image, there was a blurry figure in the background, a man with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. That night, things took a terrifying turn. Jenny and Mark were jolted awake by the sound of screaming. It was high-pitched and frantic, reverberating through the house. They leaped out of bed and searched every room, but found nothing. The screaming grew louder, more agonizing, and they realized it was coming from the basement. Mark grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat for protection. Jenny clung to him, her heart pounding as they descended the creaky stairs. The air in the basement was icy cold, and the light from the flashlight seemed to dim unnaturally. As they reached the bottom step, the screaming stopped abruptly, plunging the basement into an eerie silence. They shone the flashlight around the room, and their eyes fell on the wooden box Jenny had found earlier. It was now wide open, its contents scattered across the floor. The photographs were ripped and shredded, but one picture remained intact. It was the same elderly woman, but this time she wasn't smiling. Her face was twisted in terror, and behind her, the hollow-eyed figure loomed larger than ever. Before they could react, a shadowy figure emerged in the corner of the room. It was tall and dark, its eyes glowing faintly in the beam of the flashlight. Mark froze, unable to move, while Jenny let out a strangled gasp. The figure took a step toward them, and the temperature dropped further. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the house itself was alive and watching them. The couple didn't wait to see what would happen next. They bolted up the stairs and out the front door, leaving the lights on and the house unlocked. Jenny didn't even stop to grab her purse. They drove away, their hearts racing, vowing never to return. The next morning, Mark received a call from their realtor. The house had been broken into, she said. The back door was found wide open, ripped off its hinges. When they returned to retrieve their belongings, the damage was far worse than expected. Deep claw marks gouged the walls and door frames as if some wild animal had been unleashed inside. The couple learned from neighbors that the previous owner's husband had disappeared decades ago under mysterious circumstances. Some locals believed he had been murdered and buried on the property, though no body was ever found. The elderly woman, they said, often spoke of seeing her husband's ghost, claiming he wouldn't let her leave. The house was eventually listed again, but never sold. No one wanted to take the risk of living in a place with such a sinister reputation. To this day, locals report strange occurrences around the property. Lights flickering on and off at odd hours, muffled screams in the dead of night, and shadowy figures visible in the windows. The house stands as a chilling reminder of the horrors Jenny and Mark narrowly escaped, its doors forever closed to the living. When Rachel bought a duplex as an investment property, she thought it was the perfect way to start her real estate journey. The upper unit was vacant, but the lower unit had a long-term tenant named Mrs. Dawson, an elderly widow who had lived there for over 30 years. At first, Mrs. Dawson seemed like the ideal tenant. She always paid rent on time, though Rachel rarely saw her. Whenever Rachel visited the property, she noticed the curtains in the lower unit were always drawn, and there was a faint, sour smell emanating from the apartment. One day, after receiving no response to multiple phone calls and emails about a maintenance issue, Rachel decided to check on Mrs. Dawson. She knocked repeatedly, but got no answer. Concerned, she used her spare key to enter. The apartment was eerily quiet. The smell was overpowering now, like rotting garbage. As Rachel ventured further inside, she found the living room in pristine condition, as though no one had lived there for years. But the kitchen told a different story. Moldy dishes piled in the sink, expired food spilling out of the refrigerator, and cockroaches scuttling across the counter. When Rachel entered the bedroom, she froze. Mrs. Dawson was sitting in a rocking chair by the window, staring at the wall. At first, Rachel thought she was asleep, until she noticed her chest wasn't moving. Mrs. Dawson had been dead for weeks, her body eerily preserved by the cold air seeping through the poorly insulated room. Shaken, Rachel called the authorities, who confirmed that Mrs. Dawson had passed away quietly in her sleep. But the nightmare didn't end there. After Mrs. Dawson's body was removed and the unit was cleared, Rachel began preparing it for new tenants. That's when the disturbances began. Lights flickered on and off at random, even after Rachel replaced the wiring. Footsteps echoed through the empty apartment at night, loud enough to wake her in the upstairs unit. Objects moved inexplicably. Keys left on the counter would appear in the hallway, and doors opened by themselves. The worst came late one night when Rachel checked her voicemail. The call log showed a missed call from Mrs. Dawson's number, which Rachel knew had been disconnected after her death. The voicemail was garbled static, but one phrase cut through clearly. "You'll never replace me." Terrified, Rachel tried to rationalize the events. Perhaps it was an electrical glitch or her own imagination playing tricks. But as the occurrences grew more frequent, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something or someone was trying to make her leave. The final straw came when Rachel awoke to find the words, "She stays," scrawled in condensation on her bathroom mirror. She sold the duplex at a significant loss, unable to endure the torment any longer. The new owners, unaware of the property's dark history, moved in within weeks. Rachel later heard rumors from neighbors that the disturbances had continued. Mrs. Dawson, it seemed, had no intention of leaving her home, even in death. Real estate agent Kyle prided himself on selling even the most difficult properties. So, When he was tasked with selling a foreclosed home that had been sitting vacant for years, he saw it as a challenge. The house was massive, with an open floor plan and large windows, but it had a dark reputation. Locals whispered about a tragic family murder that had occurred there. Kyle dismissed the rumors as small-town gossip and staged an open house. The turnout was decent, with several couples and families touring the property. But as the day went on, strange occurrences began to pile up. A woman touring the kitchen screamed, claiming she'd seen a bloody handprint appear on the counter. Kyle rushed over but found nothing. Another guest reported hearing faint sobbing coming from upstairs. When Kyle investigated, he found the second-floor hallway empty, but the air was icy cold. The final straw came when a young boy wandered into the basement. His parents frantically searched for him, and when they found him, he was staring at the wall, whispering, "They don't want us here." Shaken but determined, Kyle decided to stay late and lock up alone. As he walked through the house, turning off lights, he heard footsteps following him. He turned, expecting to see a straggling guest, but the hallway was empty. When he entered the living room, all the furniture he had staged was overturned. On the wall, written in what looked like dirt, were the words, "Get out." Kyle ran out of the house and never returned. The property was eventually demolished, but the lot remains vacant. Neighbors say they still hear screams late at night, a chilling reminder of the house's dark history.